peace be upon you, and welcome to a new episode. At dawn on December 16th, 2005, on the outskirts of Bangalore, in an isolated area called Anjanapura, several police cars were parked along the side of Kanakapura Road. No one was speaking. The silence that had taken over the place was not an ordinary kind of silence. It was the kind that made you feel that something terrible was about to be uncovered. Among the officers, there was one man walking with his head lowered, as if he were barely able to drag himself forward. He raised his hand and pointed toward a drainage ditch beside the road. No one asked him any questions, and no one said a word to him. Everyone knew that this was a moment they would remember for the rest of their lives. One of the officers stepped toward the ditch and looked inside. Seconds later, he quickly stepped back, his eyes wide with shock. There was the body of a woman, lying in the ditch. She had apparently been there for nearly 2 days, and there were clear signs of violence on her body. No one needed to say anything. Everyone there immediately knew that this was the young woman all the newspapers in Bangalore had been talking about for the past 2 days. The woman who had disappeared after getting into her company car in the middle of the night. The woman whose mother had spent every day at the police station, standing there from morning until evening, desperately waiting for any news. Her name was Pratibha Murthy. She was not even 25 years old, but her story would not begin at that moment. The investigators standing beside the ditch initially had a simple theory in mind. Perhaps a robbery had gone wrong and turned into murder, or perhaps a stranger had taken advantage of the fact that she was alone on the road in the middle of the night. But the initial report revealed something strange. There were no obvious signs of the kind of violent struggle that might have indicated a sudden attack by a stranger, and nothing appeared to have been stolen from her. The theory began to fall apart from the very beginning, raising a much more disturbing question in the minds of the investigators. Could the person who did this have been someone close to her, someone she herself trusted? In the mid-1990s and the early 2000s, Bangalore was rapidly transforming into a global hub for technology and BPO services. Major companies like HP had opened massive operations there, employing thousands of young men and women in shifts that lasted throughout the night to accommodate working hours in the United States and Europe. These jobs offered an entire generation of young people a real opportunity to change their lives. But the price was working during hours when the streets were nearly empty, with only taxi drivers and security guards moving around. Thousands of young men and women went to work and returned home late at night countless times without ever facing a problem. Until the night that would change everything. Pratibha worked the night shift at a global company called HP GlobalSoft, at the company's branch in the Electronic City area of Bangalore, the capital of Karnataka. Her shift started at 2 a.m., so the company provided employees with cabs that picked them up from their homes in the middle of the night and took them to the office. After their shift ended, the same transportation service would take them back home. Pratibha had gotten into the habit of sending her mother a short message every night as soon as she reached the office entrance. "I've arrived, Mom. Go to sleep and don't worry." Her mother, Gaurama, couldn't sleep at all until she saw that message appear on her phone screen. But on the night of December 13th, 2005, everything was about to change. Before Pratibha left her in-law's house, she called her mother as she did every day and said, "I'm leaving now, Mom." It was almost 2 a.m. when a company cab stopped outside the Kumaraswamy layout area. Pratibha left the house and got into the car, just as she did every night. But about half an hour later, the message her mother waited for every night never arrived. At first, Gaurama thought her daughter might have been delayed or that her phone was busy. But the minutes continued to pass and the message still didn't come. As time went by, the small feeling of concern began turning into something far more serious. That morning, when Gaurama woke up and realized she still hadn't received the message, she immediately called her daughter. Her phone was switched off. She tried again, then a third time, and then a fourth. There was no answer. She called her daughter's husband, Srinivas Shetty, who also worked for another BPO company in the Koramangala area, and asked him, "My daughter isn't answering. Has anyone contacted you?" He calmly replied, "Mom, she left for work early. Maybe she's busy." But that answer did nothing to reassure Gaurama, because her daughter had never forgotten to send that message before. Gaurama then called the reception desk at HP GlobalSoft herself and asked whether her daughter had arrived. The answer she received made her feel as if the ground had suddenly disappeared beneath her feet. Her daughter had never arrived at the office. At that moment, the situation became serious. Gaurama immediately went to the police station and reported her daughter's disappearance. A city like Bangalore, which at the time was at the height of its rise as the Silicon Valley of India, was home to hundreds of multinational companies and thousands of young men and women working night shifts in the BPO and IT sectors. The city couldn't simply ignore news like this. A young employee had disappeared while riding in her company's cab. It didn't take long for the story to reach the media. Local television channels and newspapers began reporting headlines about the mysterious disappearance of an IT employee in the middle of the night. The intense media attention put enormous pressure on the police. This was no longer just an ordinary missing person report. It had become a high-profile case. The police began their investigation at the HP GlobalSoft office. They requested the records of every company cab that had left that night, along with the names of the drivers responsible for transporting each employee. And then the first major question emerged. A driver named Vishal, who usually drove Pratibha home, said that he had gone to her house as usual, but before he arrived, he saw her get into another car. The police questioned the other drivers. Each one claimed that they had been carrying out their own assigned duties and had nothing to do with transporting Pratibha. As the case became increasingly complicated, it was transferred that same day to the crime branch, which immediately requested a complete list of every company driver, including those who had not been officially scheduled to work on the night of the incident. The investigators started with the most important piece of evidence, Pratibha's mobile phone records. They reviewed her recent calls and discovered that the last person to speak to her was a man named Shiva Kumar, another driver who worked with the same company and had driven her home several times before. The question was obvious. If Shiva Kumar was not officially scheduled to work that night, then what was he doing outside her house at 2 in the morning? The police obtained his address from the company records and requested his recent location details from the telecommunications company. But when they reached his village, they discovered that he was not there. His wife had left for her parents' home 10 days earlier, and Shiva himself had disappeared without leaving any clue as to where he had gone. December 14th passed without any real breakthrough. Gaurama spent the entire day at the police station, from morning until evening, repeatedly asking, "Have you found out anything about my daughter yet?" And every time she received the same answer, "We're still working on it." But that same evening, a crime branch team arrived at a rented room in Bangalore where Shiva Kumar had been staying. They could hear a television playing inside. They knocked on the door, and Shiva Kumar himself opened it. The television was tuned to a news broadcast reporting on the disappearance of Pratibha Murthy. The police arrested him immediately. During questioning, he denied everything. He claimed that he had not gone to work during that period because he had been sick and was on leave. He even tried to convince the officers that if he were actually guilty, he would have run away instead of sitting comfortably at home. But the phone records were right there in front of them. He was the last person to speak to Pratibha. Despite the evidence, he continued to deny everything for hours. He changed his story several times, but each version only created more contradictions with the evidence the investigators already had. Then, on the night of December 15th, after hours of questioning, with the officers repeatedly confronting him with the phone records, he finally broke down and confessed, saying, "I was the one who called her and asked her to come outside. I was the one who drove her in the car." On the morning of December 16th, he led the police team to the Anjanapura area. And that was where the events we described at the beginning of the story took place. The medical report released that same day revealed the brutal truth. Pratibha had been sexually assaulted, and the cause of death was a deep wound to her neck, inflicted with a sharp object. When the news became public, genuine outrage spread throughout Bangalore and across Karnataka. Many women working night shifts suddenly felt that their own safety was directly under threat. A much broader public debate began over how responsible companies were for protecting female employees who left their homes at hours when the streets were practically empty. But one question remained in the minds of everyone who heard the news. How does the life of an ordinary person, someone who works the same job and interacts with the same people every day, reach the moment when he decides to kill a colleague? How does a man Pratibha had seen countless times, a man who had greeted her at work without ever making her feel threatened, become the very person who would lead her to her death? To understand that, we need to go back and find out who Pratibha really was, who Shiva Kumar was, and what had been happening in each of their lives in the months before the night of December 13th, not just the hours leading up to it. Pratibha Murthy was her mother Gaurama's only child. Her life had not been easy from the very beginning. She was just 15 days old when her father died in an accident involving a gas stove that exploded while he was cooking at home. From that day on, Gaurama refused to remarry. She raised her daughter alone, working hard and sacrificing everything to give her a good education and a better life than the one she had experienced. Pratibha grew up and achieved the dream her mother had always hoped for: a respectable job at a global company. Before joining HP GlobalSoft, she married Srinivas Shetty in what was described as a genuine love marriage. He was also working for another BPO company in the finance sector, with his office located in Koramangala. The couple were happy together, and there were reportedly no major problems in their marriage. Several months after the wedding, Pratibha was hired by the company. Gaurama felt an indescribable sense of pride whenever she saw her daughter wearing her company ID badge. She would tell the neighbors, "My daughter now works for a big American company." It was almost as if her daughter's success was a personal victory for Gaurama too, after all those years of hardship and loneliness. Pratibha divided her time between her mother's home and her husband's home, especially because her mother was living alone after the marriage. As for Shiva Kumar, his life was completely different. He was an ordinary driver working for the same company, living an apparently uneventful life until his personal life began to fall apart. 10 days before the crime, he had an argument with his wife, and she left to stay with her parents, leaving him alone at home. What began as what appeared to be an ordinary marital argument would become the first step in a chain of decisions that would eventually end in tragedy. No one could determine exactly what had caused the original argument, but his co-workers later told investigators that in the days leading up to the crime, Shiva appeared troubled and withdrawn. They also noticed that he was behaving with an unusual level of irritability. According to his confession, Shiva Kumar began experiencing psychological pressure and developed a disturbing fixation on the women around him. He became obsessed with the idea that he needed to prove to himself that he was still capable of controlling something in a life that he felt was slipping out of his hands. In a desperate attempt, he called 3 other female employees from the company and asked them to ride in his car, using various excuses. All 3 refused without suspecting anything unusual. They simply dismissed the incidents and never reported them to anyone. That's when he thought of Pratibha. She knew him as an ordinary co-worker and had absolutely no reason to suspect him. On the night of December 13th, he arrived near Kumaraswamy Layout shortly before 2 a.m. and called Pratibha. "Come downstairs. I'm here to pick you up." She was surprised and asked, "Why are you here tonight? Vishal is usually the one who comes." He quickly replied, "Vishal isn't here. I'm the one taking you tonight." Something about the situation felt strange to her, but she didn't suspect him. She got into the car as she did every night and sat in the passenger seat beside the driver. She dozed off for a while. When she woke up, however, she realized that they weren't traveling along the usual route. Concerned, she asked, "Where are we going? This isn't the road to the office." He came up with another lie, claiming that he had to pick up another female employee first. Pratibha became even more uneasy, but she remained silent. She tried to convince herself that everything was normal and that there was no reason to be worried. After all, the man behind the wheel wasn't a stranger she had encountered on the street. He was a co-worker she had seen around the company many times before. When the car entered the deserted streets of Anjanapura, it suddenly came to a stop. Shiva pulled out a knife and held it against her neck. In a terrifying voice, he told her, "Stay quiet. If you scream, I'll finish you right here." Pratibha felt her entire body freeze. Her heart began pounding violently as she struggled to understand how an ordinary night had suddenly turned into a real-life nightmare. Amid the terror, she spotted a police patrol vehicle, a PCR van, approaching from a distance. For a moment, she felt a glimmer of hope. Her only chance of survival seemed to be just a few meters away. But Shiva saw the police vehicle too. He quickly rolled up the windows and placed his hand over her mouth. The police vehicle passed them without stopping. The moment that might have saved a human life disappeared forever. After the police vehicle was gone, he pulled her into the back seat and sexually assaulted her while threatening her with the knife. Pratibha tried to fight back and defend herself with all her strength, but there was little she could do against an armed man in a completely deserted area. When he was finished, he killed her with the same knife to prevent her from reporting him. He then dragged her body out of the car and dumped it in the drainage ditch we mentioned at the beginning of the story. Afterward, he went home as if nothing had happened. He changed his clothes, ate, and went to sleep. The next morning, he turned on the television and saw the news reports about Pratibha's disappearance. For a moment, he was frightened, but he reassured himself that no one would be able to trace the crime back to him. That confidence lasted only until the trail from the phone records led investigators to his door just 2 days later. To the investigators, the contrast between his false confidence on the first day and his complete collapse 2 days later was further evidence that the crime had not been the work of a highly calculated criminal. Instead, it appeared to have been a sudden outburst by a man who had completely lost control of himself. After his arrest and confession, the case went before a fast-track court in January 2006. He was charged under the Indian Penal Code with 3 offenses: kidnapping, rape, and murder. The case remained in court for years because of repeated delays. By 2010, local newspapers were publishing articles with headlines such as, "4 years have passed, and the case is still in court." The delays only deepened Pratibha's family's frustration as they waited for the justice they had been seeking after everything they had endured. Then, in October 2010, the court delivered its verdict. Shiva Kumar was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Shiva Kumar appealed the sentence before the Karnataka High Court in 2011. On May 4, 2016, the High Court upheld the life sentence. But he continued challenging the verdict, and the case eventually reached the Supreme Court of India. Then, in a major development in March 2023, the Supreme Court reduced his sentence from life imprisonment to 30 years in prison, citing factors including the absence of previous criminal convictions and the principle that every person should have an opportunity for rehabilitation. The case was far more than an ordinary criminal investigation. It became part of a broader movement demanding greater safety for women working in India's IT and BPO sectors. It also became a major turning point in the country's discussion about the safety of women working night shifts. A separate legal case was even brought against Som Mittal, then president of NASSCOM, the organization representing India's software industry, concerning the legal responsibility of companies for the safety of female employees working at night. The matter eventually reached the Supreme Court in February 2008, which affirmed that companies had a genuine legal responsibility to protect their employees, not merely a moral one. In the years that followed, many companies introduced additional safety measures. Some required security personnel to accompany every vehicle operating at night, while others implemented live tracking systems for company vehicles, allowing management to monitor the vehicle's location and know who was inside at any given moment. Gaurama, Pratibha's mother, continued for many years to appear in the media and demand the death penalty for her daughter's killer. She refused to accept imprisonment as sufficient justice. In several interviews, she said that her life had become like a prison without her daughter, and that whenever she thought about the possibility of the killer one day being released, she felt that justice had never been fully served. The Supreme Court's decision in March 2023 to reduce the sentence was, for her and her family, another painful blow after so many years of waiting and enduring. Even today, whenever the subject of the safety of women working night shifts comes up in India, the name Pratibha Murthy continues to resurface. Not simply as a tragic memory, but as a lasting reminder that the price paid by one woman helped make thousands of others safer in the years that followed. A simple message that was supposed to reach a mother in the middle of the night became part of the reason an entire industry changed its safety policies. And the story of a young woman's life, ending in a drainage ditch on the outskirts of a city, became a lesson etched into the memory of an entire country about the price a woman can be forced to pay simply for trying to live her life and build a better future for herself and her family. And with that, we come to the end of today's episode. If this is your first time on the channel, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new content. See you in the next episode. Goodbye.